All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our public meeting this evening. Roll call, all members of council are present. I'm going to dispense with the land acknowledgement that was done at a previous meeting this afternoon. To the members, any disclosure of pecuniary interests on the agenda is presented to you. Seeing none, we'll move on. In the introduction of our meeting this evening, the purpose is to hear public comment from any affected landowners of the proposed drainage works as set out in the drainage report filed by Mark Hernandez of Dillon Consulting and dated March 16th of 2022. And I'll turn the floor to our director, Mr. Bartnick, to add any more to the introduction.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Mayor and members of council. I just wanted to provide a brief overview. I also wanted to acknowledge the drainage engineer, Mark Hernandez from Dillon, is with us today as well as Oliver Moore. He's with Dillon Consulting as well. So just a bit of background here. So as council may recall, this report was brought forward to be considered back in February of 2022. Subsequent to the first and second reading of the provisional bylaw, we then moved forward and held a court of revision in March of 2022. And at that meeting, there were some discussions and revisions that were identified that needed to take place on some of the assessment schedules. And at that time, the report was referred back to the engineer. The changes to the reconsidered report can be summarized as follows. There's 3 bullets. Essentially, the frontage component of the benefit assessment for roll number 48900 had been revised to result in a fairer assessment when compared to similar properties. Those changes were reflected in Schedule C and E of the report. Special benefit assessment to property roll number 48950 for the supply and installation of stone erosion protection under Schedule D was revised. I think it had been identified under non-agricultural lands when it should have been agricultural lands. And lastly, the factored areas were revised for property numbers number 1 to 10 to be consistent with Schedule C and E of the drainage report itself. So subject to the discretion of council this evening, the reconsidered drainage report may be option A would be referred back to the drainage engineer to have it reconsidered if it appears that there are or may be errors in the report, or for any other reason, should it be reconsidered. Or secondly, provisionally approved by giving first and second readings to a provisional bylaw. I also wanted to note that the town is not assessed within the drainage report. There are no roads that the town owns that are located within the drainage assessment itself. So the town does not have an assessment in this case. That summarizes my discussion on the report. I'll turn it back to you, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bartnick. I know delegations we have with us Mark Hernandez from Dillon. Is there anything that you would like to bring forward, Mr. Hernandez?
Good evening, and thank you very much. No, I believe Mr. Bartnick has covered all the main points. Thank you.
Okay. Then I will call on Ms. Josette Eugenie and I believe Mr. Jeff Sylvester, property owners on the drain.
Thank you very much. I really didn't have anything to add. I just wanted to participate as a delegation in case there were things that we needed to comment on or have the opportunity to participate. I did speak with Alessia earlier this week. She called me to just discuss the report. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Eugenie.
Thank you.
So then I'll turn to council. Any questions or certainly comments on the report as presented? Yes, go ahead, Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Worship, and to Mr. Bartnick and the engineers. My question is really regarding properties 1 through 10 on the report. And as I understand, they are the proposed works is to construct a swale at the back end of those properties. But as I understand, the properties on Strawberry Drive, which would be directly east, there are some properties which are draining into that area by pools and by downspouts. So they are contributing water into that drain. So to me, it's a matter of fairness, right? And they are not being assessed at all in this. So my question is really, if those properties are draining into it, should the drainage boundary be amended to include a portion of their rear yards if they're contributing water to that drain?
Mr. Bartnick or Mr. Hernandez, what,
Yeah,
Mr. Bartnick?
Thank you, Your Worship. And in speaking with Mr. Hernandez earlier today, I believe this issue has come up in the past, and I would like to defer to him at first. And if there's any other questions after that, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. Yes, there was significant discussion around this topic. And this would have been back with Mr. Paglia at the time. And what we discussed was that although we had been made aware that those properties were, as Councillor Houston said, using it to drain pools or whatnot, that really wasn't really the way it was supposed to occur, and that they are actually attributed to the sewers that front the homes. So after significant discussion about that, where we landed was that those properties would not be included in the drainage area, and that through discussions, including with the building department and those residents, that changes would be made to redirect any of those flows to the front.
Supplementary or?
Oh,
Okay.
I would just add, it's my understanding that when those adjacent lands were developed, that I think they were designed to have rear yard drainage installed, and that their storm water would be diverted to the storm sewers on the road itself and not back to the Antaya drain. So it's definitely something we'll be following up with our building department on how to rectify that situation.
Go ahead, Councillor Jobin.
Thank you, through you. And so how do we simplify that response to the landowners who are questioning that? We're going to tell them they're flowing the wrong way, but we're going to get it right after you pay and fix this. But in the meantime, the other landowners aren't assessed and not paying. Is that, do I have that right?
Through you, Your Worship. So the way the act works, it does give the powers to the drainage engineer in his assessment of the site and whether those connections would be kind of a permanent connection or a long-term connection versus something that should be fixed in the short term. And I trust that Mr. Hernandez, and through discussions with Mr. Paglia, had kind of come to a resolution on how to address those issues. I don't believe that the entire property would be draining back there. Typically you would have a high point at the midpoint of the property where drainage would, the front half of the property would drain to the road, the back half would ideally drain to a rear yard drain. And so the establishment of that rear yard drain and fixing those properties that may have insufficient grading to kind of contain their water should be addressed. The issue of, I think, of draining pools, again, that I would suspect that was kind of viewed as a kind of an interim condition or a one-off where it's not occurring, during every rainfall event, and that I think you would probably find that in. Unfortunately, in most cases, with those people who have a pool, of just trying to find the easiest or the closest outlet, right? Whether there's a rear yard drain there or not. So hope that helps.
Yeah, I was just add too that with the house tile, with the rear drain and so forth, most of the water would be going to their storm system, not to the drain. And probably if there would be a real heavy downpour, probably some runoff from half of the would certainly run off. But I think with the swale, that's going to hold that back, and then it'll finally make its way to the rear yard drain, and from there back to their storm system.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hernandez and Mr. Bartnick. I understand the explanation. I'm not completely convinced if we just tell them, put it in the rear yard drain and it'll go to, the front and in the drainage system that they have. I'm a little torn because, the swale will be right up against their rear property. But I accept the explanation. I'm hopeful that we will enforce it and make sure that because they aren't assessed, that they will not be using the improved drainage, immediately abutting their property. So, let's just, keep a close eye on it. Because I feel as though it's right there, the neighbor behind them is the one doing all the improvements. So I'm just a little torn on the whole issue, but I accept it. And, I thank Mr. Hernandez for the time and explanation. So.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, in terms of, we're talking about pools, and was there one pool, two pools? And if if the discussion with those owners, told them that you need to drain your pool in the front, so be it. It's that trust factor, and then the follow-up enforcement if it's not happening. So I'm comfortable. I'm prepared to move the report, the recommendations in this report at the appropriate time. This drain hasn't been looked at since over 50 years, so it's long overdue. And I think everyone that's benefiting is looking forward to getting this work done so that there's no more delays. So I'm prepared to move the report at the appropriate time.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further questions or comments to Mr. Hernandez or to Mr. Bartnick or Mr. Alder? Okay, hearing none. Deputy Mayor, prepared to move the report. And do I support? Councilor Dorner. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried.